Hello, BookTube, and welcome to Poetry Wednesday. I've got a lovely poem for you today, a lot lovelier than the poems we've been dealing with recently. I was using the FSG Poetry Anthology that's brand new, and I was encountering, there's a lot of good stuff in there, but I was encountering a couple of poems in a row there that didn't really sit well with me, and didn't seem to sit well with a lot of you. So instead of try my luck with that anthology again and maybe risk starting on a trend of some kind, I went back to the well undefiled. I went back to the Oxford Book of English Verse. This is the Helen Gardner edition of the Oxford Book of English Verse. And I have a really good poem that I want to read to you today. We won't have to worry about scansion or rhyme or rhythm or anything like that. We won't have to worry about it because it's from the Victorian period and they know how to do things. This is by William Corey and it's called Mimnermus in Church. You promise heavens free from strife, pure truth and perfect change of will. But sweet, sweet is this human life, so sweet I fain would breathe it still. Your chilly stars I can forego, this warm, kind world is all I know. You say there is no substance here, one great reality above. Back from that void I shrink in fear, and childlike hide myself in love. Show me what angels feel, till then I cling, a mere weak man, to men. You bid me lift my mean desires from faltering lips and fitful veins to sexless souls, ideal choirs, unwearied voices, worldless strains. My mind with fonder welcome owns one dear dead friend's remembered tones. Forsooth the present we must give to that which cannot pass away, all beauteous things for which we live by law and time of space decay. But oh, the very reason why I clasp them is because they die. I love the sentiment there. This is a very, very interesting figure. The name that he took on late in life was William Corey, and he's never had a modern biography, even though he has a fascinating story behind his life. He was a tutor at Eton, I think, and beloved by his students. A whole battalion of his former students spoke out all the time that he was the best teacher at any level of education that they'd ever had. And he was a great teacher because he was unconventional. At places like Eton and lots of other places at the time, in the middle of the 19th century, the rule was brutality, physical brutality. Boys were beaten, boys were starved, boys were encouraged to fight with other boys. The rule was sadomasochism. The masters of these institutions cared very little about formal education. They cared nothing at all about the boys except to work out their own sadomasochistic fantasies in huge numbers. There were exceptions, of course. And this author, William Johnson, was one of those exceptions. He ruled his classroom with love. He instructed his boys not only that he loved them and that they could come to him with any kind of problem, and that their learning would be based on love. We won't be mocking the slowest person. We won't be coming up with derisive nicknames for the boy who has a stammer. We won't be doing anything like that. The learning will come from love. It will be based on that, on a feeling of friendship, of fellowship. Not only that, but also he instructed his boys to love each other. That there won't be that sort of jockeying for animalistic, Lord of the Flies primacy can happen elsewhere, but not with me, not in my classes. Here, we are friends. We will love each other, and we will learn to grow that way. And he was dismissed. The headmaster dismissed him from his position with a strong whiff, not ever, as far as I know, not ever any explicit accusation of anything improper, much less pederastic, with his students, but with a strong whiff of it. And it's an unsolved mystery, and it could be solved. I know there are primary sources about this figure that have never been tapped. I know there are, including primary sources that he wrote. He wrote poetry his whole life. He probably wrote lots of other things as well. And who knows where they are. He traveled a bit for his health, and fathered children, had a wife later in life, and fathered children after those accusations. But there were plenty of people at the time. There's a lot of ground here for a researcher and a biographer to uncover. Probably someone's done that, and I just don't know about it. But this poem is not his most famous thing. He had much more famous poems, but this I thought was lovely, and I love the sentiment behind it. the controversy is intriguing on its own, especially since I think there's a strong chance that that wasn't why he was sacked. That why he was sacked had nothing to do with improprieties towards his boys, but rather had to do with either his politics, which is a murky area on its own, and that no one, as far as I know, has ever really explored, or that his very approach, his very philosophy, was fundamentally at odds with the brutality of places like Eton at the time, where boys were brutalized and taught to brutalize others. But one way or another, no matter where you stand on the controversy, and no one stands on it anymore, no one thinks about this figure anymore or writes about him, as far as I know. The poem itself, the sentiments of the poem itself, are absolutely wonderful. They're echoed all over the poetry after the Enlightenment. Of, well, I know that I love this world. I know about this world. I don't know about any other world. I know you telling me there's another world, but no one's ever come back from it, famously, as Hamlet says. No one's ever come back from it. So I don't know anything about it. Naturally, I'm afraid to just jump into it. You tell me all about it, but I know that I have love here. I know that I have life here. Ultimately, it stems from a problem that Christianity has had for 2,000 years, despite being the world's foremost religion for 1,500 of those 2,000 years. Christianity has had a huge problem describing its afterlife. It has no problem describing the afterlife for the wicked. None at all. It spends a lot of time, it doesn't do it anymore, but it used to spend a lot of time doing that. But what is paradise like? And why would you want it? What is the phrase here? The narrator of the poem wants to know, show me what angels feel, implying they don't feel anything. The narrator of the poem says, you bid me lift my mean desires from faltering lips and fitful veins to sexless souls, ideal choirs, unwearied voices, wordless strains. That's not attractively described, right? That is what the narrator of the poem is thinking awaits. That is what you're offering me. That's what you're telling me I should concentrate on. And it doesn't sound all that appealing, as when it's opposed to one dear dead friend's remembered tones, which is real and warm. And that's been a problem with Christianity. Christianity doesn't do a good job of explaining why its paradise is desirable, which is pretty amazing, considering how much time they've had. The typical Christian, if you were to ask them, they can tell you all about hell. But ask them what they're going to do in heaven all day long, and they say, well, I'll praise God. I'll be with God. But yeah, okay, you'll be with God, but what will you be doing? Or are you going to be so changed as a person that you no longer want to do anything? In which case, how can you say that it's you? How can you say that you're going to your eternal reward? You wouldn't want to sit in a room and do nothing now. It's a fascinating thing. I read as much as I can about theological discussions of heaven, of paradise. And I also read all the scam books that come out. People say, I had a near-death experience, or I coached my kid to lie about having had a near-death experience, so that I can tell you what heaven's like. But I'll only do it if you pay the $25.50 that my book cost. I follow all those scams as well. Or, there are religious nut jobs here in America, like I think her name's Kate Kerr, who believes that she goes to heaven, on the $5.50 local. She goes to heaven all the time and talks with God, chews the fat with him, knows all about what's there. And she has a congregation, and a big congregation, likes what she says about it. I follow all that sort of stuff, the serious side and the other, but mainly because the question is right there. What is paradise to a Christian? But I love the poem, and I love the sing-song beauty of it, how just exquisitely done it is. So I think we'll stick with that we'll stick with exquisitely done for a little while until we're ready to brave the FSG anthology again. So that's your poem for today. It is Mimnermus in Church, and we'll meet again next time for something else. Thank you, BookTube.